and watch it live at Boardman, Canfield, or Cortland. Or staying at home, we'll deliver right to your door. That's Coca's Pizza. We serve it hot.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're pumped that you're here. This is the show where we do our best to help you become the best version of yourself, talk about all things going on in our world, as well as, some of those leadership principles, things that we've learned, inspiring stories, so on and so forth.
I'm less spicy today, by the way.
You're less spicy.
You're less spicy, so you might have a more docile version of me.
Yeah, and I'm a bit tired. We bought a new house, and I've been cranking all sorts of stuff in there, learning how to use power tools that I bought, which is super dangerous. But we're here and it's going to be good. All right. Two quick current event things for people to think about. One, the debates tonight. I think majority of people, probably 70% or more, have made up their mind. But for the 30% that haven't, you probably should tune in. It's going to be very interesting. I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot of English spoken. I mean, between the two of them, one will be yelling at the other and, calling them senile, and they'll be corrupt, and it'll be very interesting. Just tune in for the entertainment value, if nothing else. That's happening. And then this week, we are moving into October. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like October yet. I think the weather's going to start to feel like October, but I'm really looking forward to just the pumpkin spice and all the frou stuff that starts to come, and then Thanksgiving.
You had to ruin it.
And then when you hit Thanksgiving, it's almost Christmas, and just this stretch of October to December is like my favorite time of year. So do you have a favorite time of year?
I don't. No.
Yeah,
it's all runs together. Yeah. Yeah. I could do without some of the snow and coldness.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'm not a fan of the snow, but then the leaves start to fall and everything changes. This is my time of year. So the thing I want to chat about is not changing in times of year, not the presidential debate. I want to talk about coming back to just a place of center for yourself, because as we are kicking into gear with certain things, you got a lot of projects going on and stuff like that. We find those places of solace, and you and I've talked about recharging our batteries, and we've talked about things that we can do to create maybe an atmosphere of refreshing for ourselves. But I think I want to talk about centered in the sense of purpose. Because I know for you, a lot of times you like to experiment, you like to dabble, you try this project and that project, and sometimes you spread yourself out, and then you got to come back to center, like, why am I here again? Like, does that fit in my purpose? Does this fit in my purpose? Was I really built to do that? And come back to that center place. I know for myself, with all that we've had going on, we've had this project, that project, this thing at the church. We bought a new house. I got 4 kids, like everything is kind of every which way. And I have to bring myself back and come into center. And I find for myself, and this is going to go against Joe philosophy. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with this.
Sweet.
I find for myself that I find my center best, and I find that purpose, that middle, this is who I'm supposed to be, when I learn to say no to the right things. And I know you're big into saying yes and taking on opportunities, but I also know you enough to know that you don't just do that willy-nilly.
Right. There's a whole setup before that.
There's a method to your madness, yes.
Right.
But I think for myself, the understanding that, hey, when I say no to some things, it's not that those are bad things necessarily, not even things maybe in another season I wouldn't do, but by saying no, I'm creating an opportunity for myself to say yes to the right things. And so many people don't create that space by saying no. Some people just say yes to everything because they people please, they don't know how to say no. Do you find right now in your life, you say no to the right things, yes to the right things? Do you struggle to say no? And what does that look like for yourself to bring you back into alignment?
All right. Well, first, let me share with the audience that we don't coordinate these topics before the show. These are on the fly. Regularly, you hear me say, were you listening to my meeting this morning? Because we dedicated an entire segment to this topic this morning. Like, it's not the theme of the week. It was like today, right? And it's because, I mean, these
in
are
my
all
circles, we would just say that's the anointing. The Lord's just telling me, okay?
But this is me being constantly surprised over the same phenomenon over and over and over again. But anyway, so to answer your question, I don't say no at all. Like, I mean, but I align my opportunities so that the things that happen were like planned. So they're like this train of things that happen. So I like made these things come into my world. So there's not, when it finally gets here, I'm not going to say no to it. But if some rando comes in here that I wasn't expecting or weren't part of the plan, yeah, I'm going to say no if it doesn't match up with the purpose of, you know, what I've been working on for these months and months and months. So the topic of today was, I sort of have like a recipe book. Okay. Because we get really involved in a lot of our projects, and it is really super easy to forget why you started doing the projects in the first place. Like when we sit down and write out the project, I write the why I'm doing the project when I first begin. And I have to go back there every once in a while, even before, you know, necessity calls me to do it. And I read back and say, oh, that's why I did it. And sometimes what I'm doing now and what the paper says are completely different things. And it's time to pivot and bring me back to my center.
Yep. No, yeah. And that pivot is where you end up saying no the most, I think.
Yes, for sure.
You know, oftentimes part of my job, I get a lot of requests from people. They want me to be involved in X, Y, and Z, or they want me to, hey, would you support this ministry? Or I have this idea, would the church be willing to do? You know, sometimes very personal ventures. And I find for myself that I have to have my priorities in line. I have to be centered so that I can look at people and not feel bad because I want to help. I'm that type of person. And I don't want to feel bad when I say no. So I have to fix that switch in my head sometimes, because I'll want to give them an explanation for why I say, you know, somebody will say, well, could you? And I'll be like, well, actually I have this, this, and this. And I feel like I have to explain myself to them. And I'm constantly reminding myself, I don't owe them an explanation. Like at the end of the day, no, I can't do that. And if they ask me why, well, I can't do that. I don't need to give you. I
mow people down when I'm at that point where it's not lining up. Like I have no hesitation. Debbie's a lot like you, where if someone knocks on our front door and she feels obligated to give them a proper reason for dismissing, I could reach my head out and say, go away, right? And not feel bad about it at all.
No. And I think there's a balance to those. Obviously, you know, there's not necessarily a delicateness, but you know, you don't want to come across as a jerk. Oh, go away. And I know you're being facetious with that, but in the same breath, some people are so nice, they say yes to stuff that they didn't want to do in the first place, and then they'll complain about it while they're doing it. And it's like, you should have just said no. And I think that art of saying no and realizing that your no is actually a yes to something better and bigger in your life will help some people that are stuck in that kind of people pleasing. I have to say yes to everything, and even stuff that doesn't fit my purpose or doesn't bring me back to my center. How do people get better at saying no to the right thing?
Well, this is a bad question for me for this reason, because I'll take something and I'll try to figure out if this is something that I'm supposed to do, even though I can't find a place for it. I'm like, okay, well, am I being guided to something that I don't even know about yet, or whatever? But I guess if you're really thoughtful about it, and you know the difference between, you know, the path that you're supposed to be on, the stuff that you're working on, and then you extending yourself and just helping somebody out when you can. But if you know, a lot of times a challenge will come along where I'm having some good momentum, and then something stupid will come in from the side, and no, it's just going to disrupt me. And I have such an easy time with saying, you were just a distraction and you're gone. And I could say, hey, put you on pause. And if you're still around here, then I know I'm supposed to pay attention to you. So pause it now, come see me in a week. And if they come back in a week, I'll take it more serious the second time around.
Well, and I think for a lot of folks, understanding that when you give your yes or you give your no, you need to let your yes be yes and your no be no. And so many people are only as loyal as their options in our current world. They'll say yes to an event, or especially on Facebook, it's always maybe, because something better might come up.
I hated that.
Nobody ever commits.
I hated that. It's the worst. Bad. You know, hey, Dad, can I go somewhere? We'll see. I freaking hated it. Make your mind up. Say no.
Right. But when you give somebody a yes or a no, it allows them to kind of make the decision they need to make and shape their world however they choose to moving forward. When you live in that maybe kind of limbo, it doesn't allow you to even move in. It's a lack of commitment on a lot of people's part. And some people are afraid if I say no, what are people going to think of me? I think that's probably the biggest thing. If I turn this person down, or there's a comedian that does a stint and talks about, if you turn somebody down for a date, you're really just saying, I don't even want to eat a free meal with you. But that kind of idea is like, well, you would say, well, why is this opportunity come in? And other people are saying, well, I'm just terrified of the other person, rather than, hey, does this fit in my purpose? Kind of flipping the script for themselves. So that'll lead me to this next question that I think you'll answer in a bit of a
figured out or something.
So when you say yes to stuff and you decide that it's something that should enter your world, even if you don't have time for it, how do you engage with that process and say yes? Is it gut? Do you put a pro and con chart out? Do you take a 24-hour period and think about a decision you're going to make? Or are you just, I feel it in the moment, yes, this will
I've pre-contemplated so many different possibilities that if it comes along, I've already kind of warmed up to how I'm going to fit it in. So there isn't very many many circumstances that I can't figure out whether or not, yes, I can, or no, I can't, kind of a thing. Going back to your last point, I think there's a lot of people that roll through life without purpose. So they don't weigh these opportunities against something that they're working on, because they're really not working on anything.
No, that's good. And when you have a vacuum like that and you don't have a purpose, everybody else will give you a purpose. They'll show up.
And they're not going to work out in your best interest.
Exactly.
For sure.
It's obviously for their interest. Totally. Yeah. I think for me, when I start getting into decisions about that I'm going to say yes to, or things I'm going to take on, I've had opportunities to speak at different places or to serve in different ministry capacities. I'm always looking at my time commitments. I'm looking at my family commitments, but then I'm always asking the question, just like you said, well, like, why has this opportunity come my way? And what is this going to mean 10 years down the road? Like, is this, so many meetings I look back on that I got invited to, and I was a 20-something lead pastor in a room full of all men in their 50s and 60s, and getting invited to some of these meetings and be like, why am I here? I don't have anything to offer to this meeting. And then fast forward 5 years and it turns into this relationship, and then that door unlocked, and then this thing happened. And man, I'm so glad that I showed up and took, the hour drive or whatever.
I'll tell you this though, the one that you really like shudder about, or when you pray about one thing and then not the most best form shows up of what you just prayed for, and you can't say no because you just asked for that shit, right?
I mean, you could say no.
No, you can't. I tell you, I've bouted with this. I'm like, man, I wish the opportunity. It's like, blah. Like, why couldn't you wait 2 months? I would have been ready for it.
No, yeah, that's so true. And then you have those people that will overthink those answers to prayer, or those answers that come seemingly into their life. And they're kind of like the guy that's stuck on his roof in the middle of a flood. And he's like, Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll serve you the rest of my life. And the guy comes by like on a boat and he says, hey, get in here, buddy. He said, no, I'm waiting for the Lord to save me. And then, the helicopter comes by like, you really need to get off. Your house is about to be consumed. No. The Lord's going to save me. Yep. And then the guy gets to heaven. And he's like, why didn't you save me? He's like, I sent a boat and a helicopter. What more do you want from me? But you have people that will overthink and never make a decision. They never come off the roof because they have a certain picture of the way that answer is going to come.
And it's never the perfect picture.
It never works that way. 100%. Especially when you start, because I'm going to dive into a little bit of business stuff. I know for you, you make investments, you've started companies, you love to come alongside and breathe life into people that have ideas and stuff. But obviously you've said no to people too. How do you decide which ones are right and which ones are wrong? Like, cause you've sat at the table and sometimes the math doesn't add up. Sometimes the entrepreneur doesn't add up. Sometimes the venture doesn't fit for you. I know, for instance, you have a rule against food ventures.
Yes, right.
That your wife is responsible to talk you out of.
There are probably, I get probably 4 or 5 business, pitches per week. I mean,
Okay.
there's a lot of people that come to my doorstep. And so I don't necessarily have to say no, and I don't have to dismiss it because I don't want to hear you out. I just have these rules where I'm in the pursuit of truth.
Right.
And a lot of them will disallow themselves or, dismiss themselves just by the process. It's a strict process where we dig through truth. And if it's an alignment deal, then like I said, it takes care of itself.
Gotcha. So, in those meetings though, do you ever have a moment where you're like, I really want to tell this person yes, but I know I'm supposed to say no, and do you still give them a yes anyway?
Well, it comes out as a yes, but it still dismisses them anyhow. I had one a couple weeks ago with the same, I like the guy, I believe in his product, I think he's got a good deal, and I was like, with the way that I said my yes, he was like, okay, well, I guess he bowed out because of the strict truth rules that I have. It went away. But again, still like his product. If he came in the future, fixed a couple things, it might be a yes, but it didn't fit the form.
Interesting. Because you watch Shark Tank, right? It's a great show, ton of fun. And you watch those guys and obviously it's produced and there's an element to that's made for TV, but each of them seem to have the things that drive them. If you've never seen the show Shark Tank, basically there's a group of investors. Some of them are famous and now famous because of Shark Tank if they weren't famous before. And entrepreneurs get to make their pitch. That's the deal with the show. And but they'll come in and each of the entrepreneurs always have like a different angle that they're going to sell their product. But then each of the sharks, each of the investors certainly has things that they're looking for. And it's all about, does this line up with my purpose?
Exactly.
Does this line up? How many times, do you watch, Mr. Wonderful is all about the money. Robert Herjavec or Mark Cuban, they'll say, look, I believe in you. I'd be willing to do this, but we're going to have to go in with Lori. We're going to have to go with somebody else because this is their alley. This is not my purpose. And so I'm willing to come along because I believe in you, but this product doesn't necessarily fit. So it's a yes with a caveat.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's what you're talking about there.
Yep.
That's cool. How about with Ryan, with your son? How do you train him or how do you help him make yes and no decisions? Because we all make decisions every day. We want our kids to make good decisions. How do you teach him to? Do you teach him to weigh options? Do you teach him to trust his gut? Do you how do you help him navigate that? Do you teach on the back end and let him kind of figure stuff out on the front end? Do you kind of coach him through, hey, here are your 4 options. This is what, option A, option B, option C. Which one do you think? And then like that one, how do you do that? How do you navigate that?
Well, the school that he goes to is really good about that, where the teacher doesn't tangle with the decision making. It's an observation and let you do your thing. But now when he comes up, if you came up to him and said, Ryan, you want a cupcake? Do you want chocolate or vanilla? He would look to me. He's in that phase where he wants to see what I would say about it. And I want to deny him the deferral and say, I don't know. What do you think? Right. And then it's more important, the series of questions he's asking himself to decide than the overall outcome, because I want to see what is entering into the equation, whether or not it's a people pleaser, where he wants to pick something that'll make you happy versus something that'll make him happy. And I learn a whole lot where his mind is at the time, because I mean, if he's a servant, then I'm going to treat him differently than if he's a builder or if he's a, something like that.
No, totally. Wiring definitely plays into it. I watch with each of my kids, and some of them are young, too young yet, where like you're eating chicken nuggets. Like I'm making the decision. You don't get an option, but at some point they'll get an option. And our oldest is at a spot where sometimes her process, I'm like, I would have come to that conclusion, but not by that process. Like it was cool to watch you process that.
Right.
Or she'll make a decision and everything inside of me is like, oh, I want to fix it. This is not going to be right. And I just have to like, and watch it happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've been dead wrong and I've been like, okay, I'm glad I didn't say anything. And then other times I'm like, all right, let's pick up the pieces. We're going to try this again.
But the more you let her be a crutch,
exactly.
you be a crutch, then she's just going to need you forever.
Exactly. And some parents want that. And I don't. No. I think my job as a parent is to position them for success as an adult without me. And most parents would say that line, but most parents are parenting so that they are needed for the rest of their life. That's why we have 30-year-olds that still live in their parents' basement, because they haven't been trained to go out and do life by themselves. I remember going off to college. I think my parents gave me a pack of socks and a high five and were like, good luck. Please don't come back. Right. And
but some thrive if given those kind of things. And some like just get suffocated and they don't know what to do and they're paralyzed.
Yeah. And And it's really, I feel like my decision making now is a real testament to the way my mom and dad. I can remember my mom coming in when I was in middle school or high school, and I'd have to make a decision, whatever it might be, what after school activity I wanted to do to, you know, all right, you got $100 for your birthday. What are you going to spend it on? And I can remember sitting with my mom in our living room, and she would say, well, you have option A, you could do this. Option B, you could do that. Option C, you could do that. And she'd kind of watch. And I would say, well, I think I'm going to do A. And then she'd be like, all right, well, why do you want to do that? And I was 13, 14 years old. And do that. And then we'd come back afterwards. Well, was it the best decision? Did you like the outcome? And it was never like judgy, if that makes sense. But she just wanted to coach. And then as I got into high school, I would get to a spot where my mom would, you know, A, B, C, and then you know, she'd be like, you know, this is a big decision, and she couldn't help herself sometimes. She'd be like, you should really do option B. And then I would pick whichever one my mom didn't pick just because my mom picked B. And then as I got older, and it usually would not work out in my favor. And as I got older, I realized once I got into college, I was like, I should probably just call my mom and ask her what to do. She always makes better decisions than me. And then I got to a spot where I was like, you know, what would all right, mom's taught me well. I don't need to call mom. I know how mom would make this decision. And you know, a lot of times you get to that spot like, all right, this is what my parents would do. This is what I want to do. This is probably what's best. And to navigate that and to learn how to make choices and say yes and say no and be confident in that. Because a lot of times, if you're not confident in that, there's somebody that will come along and persuade you to go in a different direction.
No doubt.
And so making choices is such a crucial thing, particularly for our kids as they grow up, because we're teaching them to stand on their own 2 feet. Because someday they're going to say no to something, and someone's going to be like, well, why? And it's not going to be a sale thing. It's going to be a huge life choice. You know, but you know, we talk about big things like addiction and drugs and alcohol, or all sorts of stuff. And if they're not confident to make that decision and then to stand on it and go, well, I know how to make decisions, they're going to end up making some choices that they didn't want to make, but they're going to feel forced into it.
Well, when I was a kid, I was stubborn and I was a rebel, right? And if you told me that if I ran up that wall, I was going to be hurt, I don't want your input on it. I want to go experience it for myself. So I just kind of knew that I was going to be one of two things. I was going to be super smart or super dead, right? It wasn't going to be anything in between, right? Because I didn't want input. I didn't want what happened to you. I'm different. I'm the exception and whatever. And so I didn't need any prodding. I would run headfirst at just about anything that you put in front of me, and I'd go learn from it by the pains that came along with hitting it at full stride. And my son's the other way around, where I know that he would like mosey up to it and maybe poke it a couple times, but he would need some prodding to really get some momentum behind him. And I think there's everything in between. So depending on where you're at on that spectrum, knowing that somebody's going to need to either give you urging or hold you back a little bit. And it's a challenge either way. I don't think either one is better than the other.
Yeah. Have you ever had an employee or dealt with somebody in business or maybe an entrepreneur that you wanted to believe in really bad, but they just could not make a yes or no decision on certain things?
Yeah.
How did you help them, or did you just?
And a lot of people, for some reason, they will put the decision making at me, and since they can't decide, they will have me to decide, and I hate that. I mean, I always feel like, no matter what I do, there's going to be some disappointment. Either the opportunity was wasted because I don't really care, but I was charged now with making a decision for another human being that's not my own deal. And I have a lot of customers even that will defer to me, and so I make all these decisions, and I'm trying to weigh the interests of a person that's not myself as well. It's a lot of pressure, for that put on. I mean, it's great that people trust me to that level, but it's really hard to do from a, capitalist or an entrepreneur's side. Yeah.
No, it's tough when you have, somebody who's not willing to make a decision. But it's interesting from a company standpoint. Obviously you get to say yes to who you hire and no to those you don't. You get to say goodbye to those that you fire and everything in between. And sometimes you are making those decisions, but I think most of the time people are making those decisions for themselves.
Yes, that is true.
You're just reinforcing their decision. I often say to people when it comes to to church stuff, they'll say like, why does God send people to hell? And I said, God doesn't send anybody to hell. God just affirms their decision to live without him. Like they didn't want to be with him. So be it. He's not, just like your boss saying, well, I'm not firing you. You chose to show up late 15 times in a row and I wrote you up. Like, this is not my decision. This was your decision. Yes. And we all hate that, when we were on the younger side of that, but it's really a maturity to understand, like, I put myself in this predicament. I forced their hand. They actually didn't pick, I picked. Has there ever been a decision you've made where you've said no to something and you look back and you went, because it panned out really good?
No, I don't think I've passed on much of anything, and anything. I was lucky with a lot of things that I said no to the first time around. I was supposed to do it, so it cycled back around and then delivered on the second go round. So I don't think I've got one. How about you?
I think if I look back at the things, so I always find the good in things though. So like I look back at where I went to college and some of those things, and now I look at my student loan debt and I'm like, maybe I should have done something differently. But then I'll justify the experiences I had and the way I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't do those things. So I tend not to have too many regrets, yes or no. Like I realized that whether the decision played out the way that I thought it would or it didn't, it's made me who I am today. And so I try and appreciate those things. There's a few of those things that I've said yes to that I was blown away at the dominoes down the road that I was like, wow, I can't believe that one appointment turned into this 5 years later or whatever. And I think that for me is more, it's more what I've said yes to than what I've said no to. I can't remember too many things I said no to, if that makes sense.
So when you bury your soul, is there going to be people hitting you up for $20 now that they know you have a struggle?
Well, I've learned to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, I'll just be, transparent with we have the Pay It Forward box at the church, and we've, gotten a partner with that. And that's a really unique approach to benevolence, in the sense that, people are leaving what they can and taking what they need. There's no kind of tracking of who takes what. Somebody could be taking stuff every day and other people not getting anything. And I know you've wrestled with that a bit. But I know on our and with benevolence at the church, like we have a process to that, because we want to make sure people, if it's going to be a long-term issue, that we get them a long-term solution. So if you're disabled or you're not able to work or whatever, we're not just going to keep coming here, but we're going to help you get connected with the right social programs or whatever it might be, so that you have a long-term solution and you don't have to keep coming for a handout, but we can actually get you something so you can go grocery shopping and do some of the things you need to do. And I've learned in that experience how to say no delicately, because you have people sometimes coming in that they're like, I really need X, Y, and Z, and I don't have X, Y, and Z to give you. We don't do that. We will pay for bills, but we don't give cash directly to anybody. So like, hey, bring us your bills. We'll gladly help you pay your rent or bring something up. And we do that quite often. But in certain instances, we've had folks come in and they're trying to kind of game the system, and it's super frustrating for me sometimes. And I know you've wrestled with this with the Pay It Forward box particularly. And it's so hard because they'll come in and then we have a form that they'll fill out, and they'll do an interview with Pastor Joanne, who's over that. And Pastor Joanne will be like, well, you're on this assistance and this assistance and this assistance. What do you mean you need X, Y? Explain this to help me understand this, because you're getting, in some cases, thousands of dollars a month to take care of your family. What are you doing with the money that you need the church to give you more money? And we want to be good stewards with that. We don't want to be dumb. But you've had a little bit of a different approach, obviously, with the Pay It Forward box, to just say yes and let God sort them out is kind of the approach with it, because you've had people that come in and just clear the box out.
Yeah. Well, in your case, that's sort of like what I was talking about, where a simple challenge will take someone that, if it weren't for that challenge, you'd be in that same predicament where you'd say yes and you'd just be enabling and it wouldn't be part of it. Yeah. Now, I don't make myself 100 times as available as you guys are there. So if I'm aligned where I'm there and another person is there, then I'm going to make consideration. I was supposed to be there. And and I'm supposed to do what was being asked of me. Now, you know, if I'm walking down the street and some guy says, hey, you got $20, I always put in that predicament, like, okay, like, I don't know what to say here, right? I probably got $20 and I'm probably not going to give it to you in this moment. Or, you know, I feel that way that today's the day and yeah, I am going to give you. And I don't know what it's going to be and it's not about mood. It's just whatever I'm supposed to say or do is what I do.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason to it either.
And that's a tough one too, because you get asked that all the time. And I actually had a person pull up alongside of me in their car, and they shared a story. I was at a stoplight, and they were like, you know, do you have $50 to get us gas or whatever? And I was just like, I didn't feel right about it. Just didn't feel right. Yeah. And they were like, you know, just pull off the side of the road here. We weren't necessarily in the best of areas, and I was just kind of like, that's not going to happen tonight. Sorry. And oh, no problem. Have a good night. And they sped off. And I thought to myself, I could have really helped somebody, or I could have, you know, ended up in the newsreel, you know, like I didn't know. And I was uneasy enough about it that, you know, my conscience or whatever you want to call it, my spirit was like, don't do that. That's not a safe spot. And then craziness was the next night, somebody in the church had the same experience with the same car, different story they handed them. But when they described the car, it was like, they called me and they said, we actually pulled up and decided to give the person, gas money or fill their tank up or whatever. And it ended up being totally fine. But the same person, same car, different story they handed us. But at the end of the day, they felt like, hey, I'm just going to do that and it's going to be okay. And where I was like, man, I'm kind of uncomfortable. And then, you know, I went home and I'm like, I'm the pastor and I didn't help that person. And I felt this big, but no, it was right in the moment.
Guided the right way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And so, well, we could continue talking all night, but is it National Coffee Day today?
Is it really?
That's what I've heard. That's what Instagram has told me.
Okay. I'm on my fourth pot today, so I celebrated even if unwittingly.
Yeah, you had an IV of it. So, well, drink some good coffee today if you haven't. And but whatever decisions you're going to make, let your yes be yes, your no be no, and become the best version of yourself. Choose to be in that center of your purpose, and be able to say yes to the right things and no to the things you shouldn't. We'll see you Thursday.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about it.